Here in the Southeast United States, we have reached that time of year. It's the time of year we all kind of dread a little bit. And mostly, we really dread having Jim Cantori show up in our hometown. There is a lot of anxiety in our senior community these days as we anticipate hurricane season. And this year especially, they say there's supposed to be more potential weather issues than there have been in years past. So today I wanted to bring a very dear friend of mine on to talk about what does that look like in our assisted living facilities and in our skilled nursing facilities. Jenn Fitterman from Next Step Senior Solutions, thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So Jenn, tell me a little bit about what brought you into the senior living world?
Serendipity. I certainly didn't plan to it, but those are always the best, right? The things you don't plan. So I actually had a friend who, invited me, showed up on my doorstep one day, and invited me to come work with her. And that was actually a hospice job many years ago. And I found that I enjoy helping people through difficult transitions. And it just the career kind of went from hospice to skilled nursing to home care to companion care to then being an administrator of an assisted living and then starting our own company.
And your own company, Next Step Senior Solutions, has a couple of different facets. One of them being that you guys are overseeing the care of 3 different buildings here in the state of Florida. So you're administrators for 3 different buildings.
So we're the management company. We have administrators there.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But, and 2 of which are in coastal communities.
Yes, which is what made me think that you were probably a good expert in this, because I know I have been beside you through a couple of evacuations that you've had to do.
Yes. So between my business partner, Jeff, and I, we've evacuated an assisted living community 4 times now. So we certainly have, unfortunately, a lot of experience in that.
Yes.
And we have one that's in a floodplain, so we know anytime a hurricane comes anywhere near the west coast of Florida, we're automatically going to have to evacuate. So we've already made plans for this year to evacuate as well.
Yep. And you don't just sit there, watch the news, watch Jim Cantori show up and say, well, let's pack it all up and leave. What kind of things are you watching that makes you decide, hey, we gotta evacuate?
So we don't have just one source. We have several sources because everybody's a little different, right?
Right.
So we start as soon as something starts brewing in the tropics. We're keeping a close eye on it. But even before that, we started months ago making sure that we had our plans together, that we've got checklists and inventory and all of that.
Right.
So we make sure that all of our communities have what they need, whether they're going to shelter in place or evacuate.
Right.
So the planning starts months beforehand. And then as something starts to brew in the tropics, we start looking and watching and having those daily calls and, making that plan. And we're very much a proactive kind of company.
Yeah.
So we would rather go ahead and be on the safer side and evacuate if we have to, rather than wait until we know we have to.
Yeah. And now the state of Florida does kind of step in at some point and says, hey, no more choices here. If you're in this area, you need to go. So, and I know from watching in the past, they're very involved in checking the weather and making sure that people are safe, just because they don't want people to get caught last minute.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all heard horror stories of what happens when a building waits to the last minute, and it's not pretty.
Oh, yeah.
The last thing you want is to be evacuating once you already have bad weather. It's hard enough to evacuate, especially when we start talking about our memory care residents.
Right, yeah.
It's already a challenge to do the evacuation. You really don't want to be doing that when you already have high winds or rain or any other issues that might come along with weather.
Right, yes. Now, Another option that I think a lot of people don't understand that they have is that they could potentially take their loved one home,
Absolutely.
or they could evacuate with their loved one. So, what would they need to do in order to prepare for that?
So, for starters, usually the assisted living will start letting families know,
Okay.
especially when they're about to evacuate, whether it's going to be an email or a phone call, a text message. It kind of depends on the community.
Hmm.
So, one of the first questions I would ask is, how are you going to alert us that you're going to evacuate? And make sure that you're on that list. You know, a lot of times families move a loved one in and their phone number changes or an email changes, and they never tell anybody about that. So then they're wondering why they don't get calls. So please make sure that your contact information
Right.
is up to date, because when we're trying to figure out how to get everybody, you know, we're hurting cats, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
and honestly, we're thrilled when families come and take their loved ones,
Yeah.
because it's going to be more comfortable for the loved ones.
Yeah.
We're going to take them to safety, but it's not going to be a luxury. I've, you know, in addition to evacuating, I've also been a receiving facility many times, both in my corporate life as well as now running the business. And it's you're doing the best you can, and that's
Exactly.
kind of the theme. We're doing the best we can.
And you're going to have blow up mattresses on the floor. And you're
Absolutely.
going to have people sharing rooms. And one of the things that I think that people wonder about is, where do you evacuate my loved one to?
Mm-hmm.
You're not typically going to try to take them to the school that's opened up or the
Correct.
church that's opened up. So where do you normally look?
So, you know, the good news about the state is they make us, we have I think it's like 178 pages of what's called a community emergency management plan,
Yes,
that we have to submit to the state. We have to submit to the Office of Emergency Management and get approved. And in there, we have exactly where we're going to evacuate. And typically we have a couple of different options, right? Because we never know how the hurricane is coming.
Right. The path of the storm
Right.
has a lot to do with that.
So we have some south, we have some north, we have some west, we have some east. So it just kind of depends on what's going to be the safest location. And that's something that we are going to communicate to the families, as well as a phone number.
Yeah.
So that if you do want text updates on your loved ones, you can get that. You know, and back to your question about what to do if you want to take them home, you need to make sure that you're prepared for that as well.
Yes.
The assisted living will absolutely give you the medications that you need. And they're going to give you at least a 3-day supply, if not closer to a week.
And could you go and get more of those in case you're worried that you might be stuck someplace and not be able to get meds?
You
Or is- or
could.
not?
I would highly recommend talking to your assisted living, because everybody uses different pharmacies, and
Yep.
most of us use what's considered a corporate pharmacy. Like, we're not
Right.
just running down to CVS. So the other option might be, instead of getting more meds, is getting scripts
Yes.
from the doctors, so that if you do need them, you can go to your local CVS, as long as you're not staying in an area that might get hit.
Right.
But, you know, making sure that you have all the supplies, and that from a safety standpoint, especially if you have a memory care loved one, I highly recommend, if you can take them home, taking them home.
Yes.
Because anytime you take a memory care resident out of a familiar setting, it's going to be disruptive for them. It's going to be much more challenging for them than it is for the rest of us. And let me tell you, it's challenging even for all of us, including
Yes.
the staff that goes with.
And it's just so hard for them to cope in these situations. They are usually crowded in with a bunch of people that they don't know, even staff members at the other facility that are meeting them and helping them there. They don't know them. And it
Right.
just doesn't, it is a very hard transition from them to go up to wherever they're going and then to go back into the
Absolutely.
community. So if family members can step in for a few days and help out with that, it really makes a difference in your loved one's life.
And the sensory overload,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah,
not
I
only
think
is it
about
a
that
new
too.
location, but I got to tell you put a lot more people in a community that's not meant for
Right.
that many. The noises, the lights, you know, sometimes
Right.
we do have lights out at a certain point, but it doesn't mean that we're not having to turn lights on to take care of somebody.
Right.
Even if you're sharing a room with someone and we've got to come in and help toilet someone or change them,
Yes.
it's going to be disruptive. So the noises, the visual, not to mention the anxiety,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, all of that is going to impact them.
And those staff really does try to minimize that it's just really hard to minimize that when you are in a shelter, an approach. So, what if your loved one is at home and you are watching the news and you are thinking, oh man, we should not be sitting here in this mobile home. If a storm comes through,
Right.
we're going to need to shelter. Usually your options are running into those school shelters, those church shelters, but every once in a while, you and I were talking about this earlier, there are some communities that will allow you to shelter there. And that is probably a better option than going where there may be a lot of pets, a lot of children crying, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Right.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Um, you know, the shelters are also doing the best they can, right?
Yes,
But
sure.
they are not equipped to handle people who have special needs. And you add to the fact that most of our seniors in our communities have hearing loss.
Right.
And what hearing they can is going to be impacted by the fact that there's all this additional noise going on. So that makes it a little more confusing. So from the standpoint of going into the shelter, trying to avoid that at all costs, making a plan beforehand.
Yes, I love that idea.
Hurricanes don't come out of the blue.
Right.
So making sure if you know that your loved one is in a floodplain, is on the coast, is in a structure that may be impacted by high winds and heavy rain, or any kind of flooding. You have a retention pond out back. I've lived in homes where we had a retention pond that never retained anything until a hurricane came through, and suddenly I just watched it creep up closer and closer. So making those plans ahead of time, so you're not trying to make those at the last minute.
Yes.
Making sure that you're getting the alerts. There are lots and lots of places that you can get alerts on your phone. The other thing that we encourage people is, as far as the pre-planning, is a lot of times mail can get disrupted. So if your loved one is needing their Social Security check, get that electronically put into your account ahead of time. Don't be waiting for a check to come. There's also
if medications are coming through the mail, also plan on that.
100%. So if you do evacuate, just like if you were going to take them home, but to a shelter, take at least 3 days supply of medications. It's really important that you take disinfectant wipes and things, because it is a very communal living. And whereas in the assisted living, we're constantly walking around wiping things down, COVID changed a lot of things. And certainly evacuation, it was a massive change. And for us, we actually had to evacuate during COVID. It was the first time we evacuated one of our buildings down south, and we did it during COVID, which was a whole nother layer of challenges, right?
Layer.
So make sure that you're taking wipes, disinfectant, hand sanitizer, create a kit. There is a great website that I believe is by the Office of Emergency Management, but it's ready.gov.
Okay.
So ready.gov. And it has some phenomenal information about disaster kits and things to do to prep ahead of time. But have a plan. If you have, we get these families and there's multiple family members and they all have a different say.
Yeah.
So have a conversation about that, and maybe everybody can serve a different purpose. Like, I'm going to go to my daughter's house, but my son's going to make sure that I've got all my meds, or, find out what's going to be most important.
Yes, I love that.
And then
Delegate. Yeah.
a lot of our seniors, especially after COVID, have pets now. Your shelters are not going to accept pets. Your assisted livings that will do respite are not going to accept pets.
Now, there are some shelters that will accept pets, but then I'm just here to tell you, it seems like a zoo.
It is a zoo.
You've got to have them crated, but they're upset because they're crated and all those things. So
And the
you really
noise
need to
again.
Look.
Yep. And now you've got to
Plan.
take food for them too.
Right.
And so making sure that you're making that plan ahead of time will make things a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
So you're not in a panic.
Right.
If you decide that mom lives in let's say we do have a lot that live in, like, whether it's a manufactured home or an RV or a trailer, and you're going to think, well, maybe they want to go to an assisted living. There are some. And again, COVID changed a lot. Before COVID, it was really normal for us to reach out as a corporation, and now not as many do. So I would suggest using an advisor like Next Step Senior Solutions and ask who takes them. We have a list of who's going to accept, who has availability, what the cost is, and then help with that transition. Because one of the things that you have to have before you move into an assisted living, whether it's an emergency
Right.
or full time, is a form called an 1823. It's a 3-page form your doctor has to fill out.
So you have to have some time to do that.
Yes. I mean, we can get it done in 24 hours. We can get it done in 48. I'd rather have 72 because we do have physicians we work with that can go into the home and do it for us, which is probably what we would do. But you're going to have to do that. And then the cost is going to be somewhere in that plan for at least $150 to $200 a day.
Yes, at least.
At
I would
least.
say.
At least.
Prices maybe even more.
Absolutely. So, honestly, if you think that mom or dad are in that situation, your loved one is in that situation, being more proactive and maybe finding a place prior to.
Yes.
I mean, those are one of those ticklers that we use is it time for mom and dad to go into senior living? Is if they're in a place, we're talking, like you said earlier, about one of the busiest seasons we've ever seen. And whether it's this or the heat.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that as well because I don't care how well prepared we are for the storm. A lot of times there's trauma after the storm, especially when your seniors are living at home and they may not have a generator. All assisted livings and all skilled nursing facilities are now required by the state of Florida to have generators that are up and running and working. I believe the state even comes by, and that's one of the things that they inspect, right? Is those generators to make sure that they will actually turn on and run.
Yes.
And not everybody has that. And I remember going through hurricanes before here in the state of Florida, where it wasn't the hurricane time that was so terrible. It was after the hurricane when now you're dealing with the extreme heat and the extreme humidity. You don't have electricity anymore. For some people in the rural areas, that means you don't have running water.
Right.
And then on top of that, you've got bugs and sickness and things like that comes from all of that.
Right.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about that today too, to talk about, what do we do when that happens, when you're facing that all of a sudden?
Right, absolutely. And again, this goes back to, making a plan beforehand.
Yes.
None of
say it
this,
enough, right?
Right. None of us at this point are surprised about what happens when a hurricane comes through. We've had some very active years now.
Yep.
One of our communities is in Mexico Beach, which was hit by Michael several years ago.
Yes.
A Category 5 hurricane.
Extreme devastation there.
And they are still rebuilding. And one of the things that we struggled with on that one wasn't so much the evacuation as it took us 3 months to get the building back to where we could bring people back. Yep. People had left stuff in the fridge. I'll tell you right now, I will never forget the smell of opening that front door and smelling everybody's stuff from the main kitchen to everyone's mini fridges that had just rotted. It was horrible. So making sure that you do have, whether it's a place to go, a loved one, a family one. We're seeing a lot of solo seniors, though, too, lately, that don't have that family. So, again, making that plan ahead of time, talking to people that can help, like Next Steps, or friends, families, churches. Yeah. Going to your church and saying, hey, what happens if this, I don't have anywhere to go? Is there someone that could take me in?
Gainesville also has something that is really amazing. We have a non-emergency department here that is fantastic, and they are on top of it in emergency time. And so if you've evacuated, you come back to your home, you've got no power, you've got no water, you've got no resources, that is a resource that you might be able to call, and they can at least direct you to whoever you need to call.
Absolutely.
From there. I'll post that number in the notes, but so anything else that you can think of?
I know I've said it many, many times, is be prepared. Don't let this catch you. A lot of times we see it with families all the time that I don't want to deal with it. it's scary, right? So
Right.
instead of planning for it, I'm just going to wait and see if it happens and then we'll deal with it.
But here in the state of Florida, we know at some point a hurricane's going to be coming your way. James
Absolutely.
Cantori
Yes.
is going to come to a town right near you,
Absolutely. So
and we
just
can be ready.
pre-plan and use the resources out there. Like I said, ready.gov is a fantastic one. It has and it's specifically for seniors, what they need to do, how to get those meds, what's in a disaster kit, and why all those things are important. So make those plans now.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
wait for Jim Cantori to show up because by then it's probably too late.
And what you might want to do too for your loved one that is in an assisted living or a skilled nursing facility is you as a family may want to pack them a small box so that regardless of what the facility has to offer them, maybe some of those glow sticks, that's super comforting to me in a storm
Absolutely.
time, is to have a glow stick around my neck. And I know no matter what happens, I've got light.
Right.
Maybe they need a small flashlight of their own and some hand sanitizer of their own. So consider the things that they might want as comfort for them that you could put together and show them, hey, I'm still thinking about you. I care about you.
And a lot of those things right now, if you walk into any dollar store or Dollar Tree, you can find a lot of those things because you don't need it to be spectacular. You can also buy them. I was looking at it. You can buy them on Amazon and Walmart. A lot of these websites have them too.
Yep.
But more importantly, check those batteries.
Yeah.
We make that, and then 5 years later, the batteries have eaten through the flashlight.
That's true. That's true. I order my batteries on Amazon. I don't wait for an emergency. I have several packs ready.
Right.
So,
And don't put them in the flashlights or the radios or any of
'cause
that.
it will eat the
It
acid.
will, right. So just keep those separate, but make sure every year, even if you have that box that you're checking to make sure that they've got enough if they are going to shelter in place food and water for 3 days. So for water, for example, our equation is 1 gallon of water per day per person.
Okay. Okay.
And that's what is in assisted living we have to have. We have to figure out how much staff, how much of their family is coming, how many people, and we have to have 1 gallon of water per day per person for 72 hours. Same thing with the gas, same thing with the food.
Yep. And that's a minimum, to be
And
honest.
that's the minimum. And just like you said with the generator, the state's coming through. So, I know everyone wants to stay at home for as long as possible, but the assisted livings have gone through a lot of, and skilled nursing and independent livings have gone through a lot to make sure that everyone's going to be safe. So we have to, and it's checked by the state, have that food, have the water, have the gas or the propane to make sure, and the air conditioning units, because we have to be able to run the ACs. And they make sure every year. They're in the middle of their tours right now. I think all of our buildings have been visited at this point, coming through and making sure you have all of that.
Yep. And that is peace of mind. That is one of those positives of having your loved one in an assisted living community or in a skilled nursing facility.
Especially in Florida. Absolutely.
Well, Jenn, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciated this time. And if you have not liked or shared this podcast and you have not subscribed, I would ask you to do it now. This is a tool that is meant to be used by many. And if you don't share it, your friends may never know. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.